Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, and thank you for being a part of tonight's forum for candidates running for the 6th United States Congressional District and the state representative candidates for the 66th and 80th districts. I am Jean Bevavino, president of the South Haven affiliate of the American Association of University Women, AAUW. This forum builds upon AAUW's more than 130 years of responsible public participation. We are a nonpartisan, issue-oriented organization. We do not support or endorse candidates. AAUW advocates public discussion to ensure enlightened decisions. Locally, AAUW South Haven pursues its mission of advancing equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. We raise funds to help women pursue their higher education goals. We attend school board meetings. We monitor legislation and health issues and communicate with our state and national legislators. We register new voters and conduct candidate forums. We provide financial and personal support for youngsters to achieve literacy. We participate in the Blessings in the Backpack program in our schools and provide dinners at Open Door and for teen parents. We are a busy bunch. Tonight's forum will be presented in two parts. The first session will feature the candidates running for the 6th United States Congressional District. This session will end at 7:55 to allow time to transition to the next session that will begin at 8 o'clock. Our moderator for this evening's forum is Dr. Melinda Gruber, an AAUW member for over 20 years. Melinda is Vice President of Continued Care Services at Spectrum Health Lakeland System and President of Caring Circle, formerly Hospice at Home. She has extensive experience serving in leadership positions at local, state, and national levels. Most recently, Melinda was a Health and Aging Fellow through Columbia University, as well as a Federal Congressional Fellow through the American Political Science Association. Please welcome Dr. Melinda Gruber.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you to the South Haven American Association of University Women for hosting tonight's event, and to the City of South Haven for the use of these facilities, and to Cozy Radio for simultaneously broadcasting this event tonight. So from 7 to 8, we will start with our candidate for the 6th congressional seat. And then from 8 to 9 will be the candidates for the 66th and 80th Michigan House of Representatives. So a special thank you to you, members of this virtual audience who understand the importance of being informed and voting. And thank you to the candidate who's willing to run for office. So we are pivoting a little bit tonight. We have invited all of the candidates who are running for the U.S. Congress 6th District, including Congressman Fred Upton. And no one was able to attend tonight except for John Holdley. So we are adapting, and this will be an interview format for the next 55 minutes. So you're going to get a lot of time. If any of the candidates do happen to appear, we'll give them a chance to sit down and reorganize our thoughts then. So with that, I want to give you a chance to have an opening statement to kind of give everyone some background. So thank you.
Well, Dr. Gruber, thank you so much. And for everybody that's joining us online or listening on the radio, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your evening as you think about making a choice about the future of Southwest Michigan and ultimately decisions that will impact our entire country. You know, I come from a family of teachers and educators, and so being able to be here, having a conversation with the AAUW and thinking about the choices that's on our ballot is really powerful and personal to me. In fact, when I think about why I'm running for office, so many of the decisions that are being made or have been made over the past 10, 20, 34 years has really put us in a position where we're not able to respond to the challenges we're facing today. And I know a thing or two about doing this work because I'm currently a state legislator. You know, when I first knocked my first door, it was in response to the fact that a school ballot measure, a bond issue in my hometown failed. And my first thought was, who votes against the schools? But it turns out that there were plenty of folks who needed to be convinced. And I think we're in a moment like that in American politics today, where we need to be boldly investing in ourselves, and we've got folks that we got to convince. And so the way we're doing that is through person-to-person conversations. Now, I want to say this. You know, as I've talked to folks across the district, I'm feeling and hearing a lot of unease, and some anxiousness about the future. We know that we're living through a global health pandemic. And even before COVID-19, I talked to people who were trying to take a pill every other day to make their 30-day supply for their prescription medication last for 60 days. Healthcare is really personal to me and my family because my partner, Chris, has multiple sclerosis, and I know what it's like to have to fight with insurance companies to make sure that you actually get the care that you're needed. You know, we're the Great Lakes state. We're here on the shores of Lake Michigan, and so many people have a story about the Great Lakes, but we're still in the middle of a drinking water crisis. So many folks can't drink the water because of lead, or they're worried about PFAS in their wells. So we absolutely need to see some change when it comes to our water and our environment. But ultimately, this is a question about what do we want to do next. I'm ready to put my experience as a small business owner, as an advocate, as a legislator, to work for everybody in Southwest Michigan. I know that when we work together across the aisle, we can make big things happen. I've seen it in my own life. And I'm asking for the chance to get to do that for the folks of Southwest Michigan. I'm excited for the conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. So our first question is going to be about voting rights. And already in the election, there have been allegations of voter suppression. Citizens waiting hours to vote in Georgia, ballot box limitations in Texas, unofficial ballot box return sites in California, to name a few. What legislation would you support that would ensure all U.S. citizens 18 and older the unfettered access to the right to vote?
So as a state legislator, I actually introduced legislation that looks remarkably similar to Proposal 3 that passed in 2018. Michigan voters across the whole state said, we believe that folks should have the ability to vote securely and safely, that everybody should have the ability to vote by mail, and that we should be able to register and vote on the same day as an election. So we are not disenfranchising anyone who is legally entitled to vote. I'm glad that we have a Secretary of State and an Attorney General who are enforcing those provisions. So we're not seeing in Michigan many of the problems that we're seeing in other states. But the privileges and ballot access that we have here in Michigan needs to be shared across the country. Because one thing that makes us uniquely American is this idea that we get to vote and we get to have a say in our future, that someone is not crowned to represent us, rather we get to cast the vote, we get to decide. And this is one of the few things that regardless of your political party, everybody should agree on. I would like to see us, John Lewis, the Voting Rights Act, expand. I would like to make sure that we're implementing these secure protections that we're putting in place in Michigan across the country. Voting rights is fundamental to the functioning of our democracy, so we have to fundamentally get voting rights right.
Thank you. So the Supreme Court will consider a case within the next month which addresses the future of the Affordable Care Act. And it includes the options of parents to include adult children on their health insurance until age 26, coverage of pre-existing conditions, and covering out-of-pocket expenses for preventative health care. If the ACA is overturned, what do you foresee will be the impact on healthcare in the United States, and what would your plans be?
Healthcare is really personal to me, and healthcare is on the ballot. So I want to make sure that folks understand the difference in this race. And I need to be clear about this because there is a congressional voting record on this as well. When people say that healthcare is on the ballot, they mean that the Supreme Court could overturn the Affordable Care Act after hearing it just days after the election. And if that happened, it means that people who have pre-existing conditions could be denied coverage like they were 10 years ago. It means that we could see the return of lifetime insurance caps. So if you have a medical accident or emergency, or you have a chronic condition, you might run out of medical coverage. It means that people would not be able to keep their kids on their health insurance until their kids are 26. And I'm someone who fundamentally believes that more people should have more health care. I know what it's like to have to fight with insurance companies who oftentimes have more say over your treatment than you or your doctor. And by the way, once we started running our commercials that were talking about the cost of prescription medication, my partner's medication would cost $7,200 a month if we lost health insurance. Who's got that kind of cash? And when we started running those ads, people came out of the woodwork. People paying hundreds of dollars for insulin, people paying bills that would have been $49,000 a month for hemophilia medication. We cannot go back. And for years, we've heard conversations about repeal and replace. Congressman Upton voted 12 times to deny coverage for folks with pre-existing conditions, and over 60 times to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. This isn't right. I believe that we should see more coverage. I want to make sure that we are moving forward with universal health care. I think that this is an area that we can make dramatic change on in the country. And we've got to get it right. If we actually had universal health care of some form, we could not only make sure that prescription drugs were affordable, that people could see a doctor when they need it, not have to worry or be tied down to a job that they don't like just to have health care. But it also means that we could see advancement on things that I care deeply about and I've done bipartisan work on, like long-term care in the state of Michigan. But health care is the number one thing that we keep hearing about from voters, and it is perhaps the number one difference in this entire campaign.
Great. So I'd like to go just a little bit deeper. What would you propose to advance fair access to health care and making health care, including prescription drugs, affordable?
So I've talked very publicly about being an all-the-above solutions person when it comes to health care. In the state legislature, you've seen me do things, talk about universal care at the state level, to $5 copays for your primary care physician, or to see mental and behavioral health. I've supported efforts that would make sure that we cap insulin prices and hold pharmaceutical companies accountable when they just arbitrarily raise the price of prescription drugs to increase their profits, but without producing better results. So for me, I'm someone that says, I think we should set a bold vision. Let's have a country that literally would cover everybody, that makes sure that your health care isn't tied to your job. And that's actually one of the things that millions of Americans just discovered. During a global health pandemic, millions of Americans lost their health care through no fault of their own, just when they needed it the most. And we're seeing some really good plans. Even from whether it's the plans that Biden, Vice President Biden is proposing, to conversations around what we can do to expand access to care, all of these things are going to matter. And I also want to say we got to get it right for Southwest Michigan, because at the same time we're hoping that folks can just keep access to the care. We're worried that they're going to lose the place to go to get their medical care. We're seeing every year so many of our hospitals are on the verge of closure in our rural areas. And you shouldn't have to drive an hour to get health care.
Okay, thank you. So you brought up the global pandemic. What role should legislators play in keeping Michiganders safe during COVID-19? And also, please comment on federal and state coordination efforts.
So we shouldn't be competing with the federal government. And let me take one big step back, because I've lived through this as a state legislator. We need clear federal direction. We never had to be this bad. Of course, as we've learned more information about who knew the full extent of the virus and when they knew it, it raises questions about why we didn't have a plan. It raises questions why some politicians were told that they needed to go, the state needed to lead, and then some politicians were picking fights with the leaders of our state instead of actually solving the problems that we needed to. I support a strong federal plan that is guided by science, that makes sure that our governors are working in collaboration with the federal government, that the CDC is a warehouse for the best scientific innovation and information, and we're pushing that out so every citizen knows what's at stake and how they can keep themselves and their families safe and healthy. So, at its core, I think we need to follow the science. But we are not out of the woods yet. And we're seeing more information that we're seeing a surge in COVID-19 cases. So it begs the question, what is DC going to do to actually help us move forward in this crisis? I support a strong stimulus effort that prioritizes public health, that would make sure that we're supporting working families who are going to need a little bit of help just to get by. I want to make sure that we're funding our state and local units of government because our first responders are on the front lines and they need more support, not pink slips. I also know that our small businesses need help right now. And in fact, many of the programs that were championed in the first round of stimulus didn't get to the smallest of businesses. And in fact, your relationship with a bank was the best indicator of whether you would actually get any funding, regardless of the validity or viability of your business. And that's particularly problematic for all of our small entrepreneurs, many of whom have never had to take out a loan because they did it through sweat equity. They put their own money in. They built it from the ground up. And so being able to access capital wasn't at the tips of their fingers. These are the kind of things that we have to put in place now because the pandemic isn't done yet. And we got to make sure that we get to the other side.
Thank you for that. So considering the level of discord within our nation right now, what role should our national representatives play in promoting mutual respect and civility?
I'm someone who fully believes in civility. One thing that my folks always told me, right, is that you need to look for the good in people, and you should speak to people the way that you would like to be spoken to. And I've tried to emulate that every single day of this campaign, every day I've served in public office. And it's something that we need to continue to do. I think civility, though, is both standing up and engaging with those that disagree respectfully, but also means standing up and saying the right thing when you know something wrong is happening. And for too long, I've heard people hide behind the words bipartisanship or civility and then allow folks on their behalf to say the most vile lies or smears. It's hard to stand up and do the right thing, but we're in a moment that requires people to stand up and do the hard stuff because we are in a moment that requires leadership. We've watched us get to this point. This isn't something that happened overnight, but rather a set of discourse that we've allowed to continue for decades. And lately, it's gotten worse. But I think leadership comes from the top. So I try to model for myself how I would like to be engaged with. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. But I think we need to see that in D.C. I think we need to see the White House be a beacon of light for the world. I believe that we should be the city on the hill. I think that we should be the example of what we want to see in the world. And I'm not seeing that right now. And it's hard to stand up, particularly sometimes to leaders in your own party. I've done it. I know what it takes. Unfortunately, it seems like that seems to be in short supply right now.
Okay. We're going to move to a different topic, which is the Great Lakes and the environment. There's a lot of discussion about how our climate is changing. As your district is along Lake Michigan, what is your perspective about global climate change and the impact on the Great Lakes? And what would you do about it?
Great question. We are the Great Lakes state, and we're the guardians of 20% of the fresh water in the world. So we absolutely have to get this right. Now, there's two different questions there. So let's start with the climate crisis that we're in. Look, we got to get this right, y'all. I mean, we've got less than 9 years to make sure that we don't see irreversible climate change. And what that means, though, is a big goal that we know we can achieve. Because America figured out how to put a man on the moon when we set a big goal, and then we figured out the science behind it to get it done. And for a place like Southwest Michigan, being a leader in solving the climate crisis means jobs. It means green energy jobs that can't be outsourced or offshored. I mean, it would mean green infrastructure that would be all throughout Southwest Michigan that we could use at the same time to do things like lay rural broadband, so we're also connected to the internet at the same time. I am tired of having people take millions of our taxpayer dollars for the promise that the big telecom is going to lay that rural broadband, and all we see is crickets or more timeouts, in terms of never even be able to access the internet. So we need to take that bold action. It also means, by the way, that we got to do some things like plant some more trees, and every one of us do what we can to recycle, reduce, and reuse. I mean, this is some common sense stuff coupled with a big vision, and then making the bold investment to get it done. And that's jobs. Now, when it comes to the Great Lakes, we have to then step up and treasure it. I mean, I love, one of my favorite things to do is get on the motorcycle and head over here in the summer, and getting to spend just a minute on the shoreline is amazing. And so many Michigan families have that type of story. And we want to make sure that for families and generations to come, that they can still do that. And what that means, though, is that we have to stop having the Great Lakes be a political football. I am tired of seeing every single cycle there's a proposed budget. Recently we saw the Trump administration propose to slash those budget. Then folks try to take credit for restoring most of that budget. That does nothing to defend the Great Lakes. So let's make sure that I would love to see us move to a multi-year funding cycle for the Great Lakes. As a state legislator, I've been proud to support infrastructure efforts that actually prevent the Asian carp from coming into the lake. Let's do more to protect the invasive species and prevent them from coming in, protect from invasive species. So there are some things we can do, and we have to do them because it's our job as Michigan.
Thank you. According to the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, women experience about 4.8 million partner-related physical assaults and rapes every year in the United States. Of the 4.8 million women, only 20% sought medical treatment following an injury. How will you help change this trend, which has increased during the COVID-19 pandemic?
We absolutely need to deal with the issue of rape, sexual assault, and domestic violence that we're experiencing. As a state legislator, I've been proud to support efforts that would actually increase funding to domestic violence shelters, that would make sure that we're funding programs that prevent and that work to prevent rape, including efforts to educate folks on campus to make sure that we're changing that conversation. So it's about consent. For folks that experience domestic violence, we need to make sure that we are wrapping them in support and empowering them as survivors to chart their own future. We also have to make sure that they have medical access. This is why healthcare matters. I have shared this before, and I will share it again. As someone who has experienced sexual assault, I know what it's like to not know where to go next. I can never imagine to have the experiences that women would have. But I can say that as a legislator, I've actually done everything I could to increase access to prevent sexual assault, and for those that survive, that they get the care that they need. And it's important to remember in conclusion of this that this isn't a one-time event. People live with their experiences for years, and that's why we also, in addition to the immediate medical care that they need to receive, that we support them with long-term mental health supports, resources, so if they choose to leave their abusive situation, that they have support to do so. And it really speaks to the change that we need to see, because this is a problem as a community that we need to tackle together.
Thank you. So with the recent Supreme Court ruling that allows for unlimited funding from unidentified sources in campaign finance, do you agree or disagree with the ruling? And if elected to represent our district in Congress, what can you do to address money in politics?
So the Citizens United decision was, I think, a poor decision at the Supreme Court. It opened a floodgate to more money in politics, and it shielded it in a way that now people can have secret speech. Here's what you and I don't get to do. We are not anonymous. So when we choose to engage in public discourse, we're weighed by the words we said, and people can make choices about it. They can investigate who we are and make decisions about our life experience and how that impacts public discourse. But Citizens United opened up a flood of dark money. So while we have to wait till you're 18 to vote, a corporation that is 18 minutes old could start spending secret money in elections to influence politics. And by the time that you find out, if you ever can, who is spending that money, it's too late. We're seeing a flood of dark money in this race alone. And that's not healthy for democracy. So I'm someone who's been endorsed by a group called End Citizens United. Our goal is to make sure that we clean up money in politics. I'm ready to take a vote yes on H.R. 1, which would have significantly reduced money in politics. It would have been the largest ethics reform since Watergate in D.C. It passed in the U.S. Congress. Unfortunately, Mr. Upton voted no on H.R. 1. And, when I think about moving forward, I've sponsored legislation at the state level, or co-sponsored, legislation that would reduce the individual limits. So we're starting to then level that playing field, because regular folks who work for a living should have just as much say as opposed to a billionaire who can write an endless check. And finally, I support, even in the Citizens United decision, Section 4 talks specifically that we could have more robust transparency. So in a world where we're still figuring out how to then overturn those core components that allowed the flood of dark money, we could actually open up the transparency and put new rules. So at least in real time, we could start to see who's spending these secret dollars.
Thank you. Despite constitutional guarantees to equity, anecdotal and statistic research demonstrates implicit racial bias across many areas of life. How should legislators address this problem in order to create a more perfect union?
That's a great question, and it's so relevant to what we're experiencing right now, because our country is having a really important conversation on racial justice. We should be able to say that Black Lives Matter and make sure that it was reflected in policy. And legislators have a role in this. Legislators create and feed the systems that make major decisions on our lives. Legislators discuss funding and rules for public schools, which we know oftentimes have a significant achievement gap based on race. Legislators make decisions about the criminal justice system. And what we know is that for too long, we saw racially disparate outcomes, even in our criminal justice system. We know that we can encourage more when we fund core institutions like police, so they get the anti-bias training that so many of them are asking for. When I talk to first responders, law enforcement, police officers, they're saying they need more tools for the job. And that's why I was really glad to support additional funding. In the last budget, I delivered additional funding for things like mental health for our police officers and first responders. But it also means that when we look at things like race, like healthcare, that we have to realize the impact that race has. Black babies are suffering infant mortality rates at twice the rate of white babies. That's not right. I was proud to support Governor Whitmer's effort around healthy moms and healthy babies to deal with infant mortality rates and try to start to get a handle on that. And those are programs that we could expand across the country. And it's important that we do, because if we want to see a more perfect union, if we want to have that idea of equal justice under law, the words that are inscribed atop this U.S. Supreme Court building, we need to make sure that we're addressing these issues head on.
Thank you. This month, we have seen the Senate nominate or consider a nominee within 1 month of a presidential election when they have already voted, when many people have already voted. So how do you think voters should think about the distinction between now and 4 years ago when a Supreme Court nominee was not considered by the Senate? D.C. is going to play their games, and they can talk about the process all they want. I think voters who want to look at these set of facts will either recognize what's happening or make up or justify them in some way. What I want to actually talk to voters about is what's at stake with the Supreme Court nomination. Because Amy Coney Barrett has a poor record and has been considered hostile towards the Affordable Care Act, which means that one of the first cases that she could hear could ultimately then be one that dismantles and repeals protections for pre-existing conditions, that repeals protections for against lifetime insurance caps, that repeals the protections that let
26-year-olds stay on their parents' health insurance. It means that issues like marriage equality that were decided by one vote are on the ballot. If you know someone who is or who is LGBTQ and who's married, they could lose their protections in a state like Michigan, which doesn't have them on the books right now. They're only there because of a Supreme Court decision. And with recent Supreme Court justices asking and seeking a challenge to Obergefell, that we know that ultimately they could overturn this decision. Whether we're talking about money in politics, whether we're talking about the role of for LGBT folks in society, the environment, or healthcare, these are the decisions that will be decided by the next Supreme Court nominee. And so I think it's important that people pay attention and know what's really on the ballot, because it'll be up to Congress then to deal with that mess.
Thank you. Moving to a different topic, how would you address inequities in our tax system?
We definitely need to get to a fair tax system. I've been so disappointed as I watched votes, particularly in 2017, that Fred Upton voted for, that shifted the tax burden significantly onto working people. Under the tax plan that was championed by President Trump, 83% of the benefit went to the top 1%, which means that for so many folks, we found ourselves unable to reap long-standing benefits that helped small businesses thrive. Anyone that used to deduct the cost of their tools or their travel as a skilled tradesman or tradeswoman, they lost the ability to do that unless they could self-incorporate. For folks that were able to deduct mileage before and other reimbursed business expenses, that went out the window. So what we saw here is a giant tax shift where working people were asked to pick up the tab. Frankly, we saw the same thing in the state of Michigan, where we oversaw one of the largest corporate tax shifts under Governor Snyder. And look, I'm someone who thinks that we should have fair taxation. I run a small business. I don't want to see giant taxes on small businesses. I'm tired of working people being asked to pick up the tab so someone else doesn't have to pay their fair share. We need to move to a system that also then recognizes that we have to pay for the things we want. We've watched as when we cut taxes and run up a deficit in some of the best economic times that we had. And that is counterintuitive to anybody who's ever had to balance a budget before. I know what it's like to have to make a payroll. I know that you got to look at the money in and the money going out. And I'm not sure why we can't bring that type of common sense to D.C. But I do know that if we don't like the things that have been happening based on the votes of the people who've been there, then we should change the people that are there casting those votes.
Thank you. What is your position concerning enhancement of both Social Security and Medicare protection measures?
So I'm someone that's been endorsed by Social Security Works PAC because I've got an incredible record when it comes to standing up for the benefits that our seniors have earned, that they've paid into for a lifetime. I think that we should have a strong Social Security program. I do not want to see it privatized because that has caused harm in so many places. I do not want to see those eligibility ages raised. This is something that again is a difference between myself and Mr. Upton in this case. It's clear that we need to expand our access to these vital programs that help our seniors stay out of poverty. Medicare, the Social Security. These were inventions that people have been paying into now for a lifetime. And we have to make sure that they're there moving forward. When we saw some of the tax changes that the Trump administration's pushing forward, it could ultimately defund Social Security in as little as 5 years. That would be a disaster. I'm not going to stand for it. I'm always going to stand up for seniors. I'm going to fight for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And it's one of the key differences, I think, in this race.
Thank you. Over 40 million people struggle with hunger in the United States. What are your plans for ending hunger in the U.S.?
The fact that we haven't dealt with the issue that so many families go hungry every night is a failing. And it's one that I think speaks to the moral fabric of our country. We believe deeply that helping our neighbors and making sure that our neighbors are fed, I think goes to the core teachings that so many of us were raised in. You were hungry, I was hungry, and you fed me. And I think to myself, what could we do as a country? As a state legislator, I've worked and supported so many of our food security safety nets, our food banks. We have an incredible network. One of my favorite things to do was expand programs that actually helped use agricultural surplus. We've got incredible farmers here that are growing things, and they're leaving some of that on the field because it doesn't break even for them to bring it in and take on that added expense. But we were able to actually say, let's expand those programs, so we're paying our farmers. I was able to help fund a program that increased the amount of flash freezing that's available. So now we can essentially have fresh, quality produce year-round. And this was stuff that was going to be left in our fields. And talk about a great way to both help our farmers and help our neighbors at the same time. We can expand that across the country. We can expand our programs that are happening at our school districts. So many school districts are taking it upon themselves to have free lunch, free breakfast. Some are innovating and making sure that the kids that are leaving on the weekend get a backpack full of food. And if we want our kids to thrive, they've got to have meals 7 days a week. These are things that we can do. And on top of that, when we pay people a decent wage for doing a decent day of work, then it gives them more freedom and agency to make choices about how they're going to feed their own families. You put all this together, we could be in a much stronger place as a country.
Thank you. So this is my last formal question for you. And after this question, you'll have a chance to kind of cover any topics that we haven't had a chance to do yet. But this last question is, please let us know about any areas of another party's platform that you agree with and are willing to work in a bipartisan effort towards successful legislation.
Well, so let me say this. I believe in bipartisanship. It's something I've had to do for 6 years as a state legislator. People want us to go and to, whether it's D.C. or Lansing, they want us to fight for our values, but they also want us to work together to get things done. And, sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes we really do see the world differently on solutions. But, one thing, even one of the most conservative members of the legislature, Shane Hernandez, who was the appropriations chair, he and I worked together to deliver 2 budgets under exceptionally difficult times, and we did it together. That ultimately brought bipartisan work in agreement. So, when it comes to what's something, one thing I think Mr. Upton and I actually really agree on is tackling immigration. This is an area where we need to make sure that we're providing a path for citizenship. Immigration is an area where we need to recognize our friends and neighbors who may not be from here originally but live here now and call America home. And so let's find ways to support them. And in a safe and secure manner. I believe that we should be doing more to protect the dreamers who've only known America as their home, but were brought here, as children, and they're living in limbo, and they need to have some predictability. These are actually areas that Fred Upton and I have very similar agreements on, and so, I would love to pick up the torch and continue in that effort. And when we get comprehensive immigration reform, I think it's going to be good for business, it's going to be good for agriculture, it's going to be good for our neighbors, and it's the right thing to do. Because like I said at the very beginning, America is best when we are that light for the world. It's how we get people to be excited and partner with us. It's how we build more safety for ourselves and our families. Because when we have the position of moral leadership, it keeps everybody safer. And it speaks to the fundamental American story that we tell ourselves and we teach our children. And this is something that I think 2020 is a good year to remind us that we can still be that light.
Thank you. So thank you for answering a string of 14 thoughtful questions. And now I want to just invite you to take a few minutes and speak on any topics that we didn't cover that you think are important to hear from you about.
So there's just a couple of other things that I think are relevant in the race. You covered so many great questions, and thank you, because you really picked on so many of the things that voters are talking to us about. Moving forward, we have some big choices ahead of us. We've got to be thinking about our economic recovery as well as our public health recovery. And those two things go together. I've been a strong supporter of jobs programs. I'm a big believer that when we invest in small businesses, they will fuel that future. I also am a big believer that we are on the cusp of an incredible revitalization of so many of our rural communities who've been hit hard by outsourcing and offshoring for decades. One thing that I think 2020 saw for so many people is the value of our small towns and our rural communities. And one question I get a lot is, so what are we going to do to help our small communities thrive? And I think the solution here is one that actually makes sure that we can invest in our small communities. You ask any realtor, and they say one of the first things that they always ask about is, how are the schools? So are we supporting our public rural schools so that they get the exact same high-quality education as anywhere else? The second thing is, in a world where a bunch of us learned how to work virtually over the last few months, we could have the next best internet startup anywhere in Van Buren County, anywhere in Southwest Michigan, if they have good access to the internet. And I'm tired of waiting for big telecom to just keep promising us that they're eventually going to get here, and then telling people that they've got to pay thousands of dollars of bills just to connect to the internet. If we really invested in rural broadband and we opened that up just like we did when we electrified the prairie, we could be a leader in so many internet and so many virtual startup opportunities here. That's jobs right here. And then lastly, we got to get the infrastructure right. Clean water, good roads. If we put all those pieces together, I think we're going to see a lot here. The other issue that we didn't cover today, but I think is important to speak to, particularly now, is our veterans. My grandfather is a World War II veteran. I have veterans in my family. And it has disappointed me year after year watching Michigan be consistently ranked in the bottom, 50, 51st, 54th when it comes to veteran care. As a state legislator, I was able to partner with folks like Senator Winnie Brinks to make sure that we were putting funding in our veterans' home. But the amount that we can do as a state legislator is so small. We did programs and I've supported bills that would make it so folks that are coming back into our communities from their service are able to have more of their skills directly applied to certifications and licensure. I think that's smart. I would love to see us be able to expand higher education opportunities. But one thing that we should be talking about is, why is our veteran care consistently so low? I just had someone come up to me yesterday and talk about the VA made a disability ruling, and she still's having problems getting her benefits. I just had another person talk to me about how the cost of TRICARE went up. And, we made a promise. We made a promise to veterans that we were going to give, that if they put their life on the line for our country, that we were going to fight for them and make sure that they had everything they needed. So what's the holdup? And, this is the difference where if after 34 years we're still at this place in terms of our rankings for veterans care, maybe we should try a different approach, because I'm ready to fight for our veterans. So I think those are probably the other two issues that I'm so glad we could cover today, but really just appreciate you having the forum and how important these issues are.
Wonderful. Well, then I am going to say thank you to you for your participation this evening, and thank you to our virtual audience for your interest. We'll be taking a short break, and we will return at 8 p.m. with the candidates for the Michigan House of Representatives. So thank you again.
Thank you to everybody who joined. I truly appreciate it. To learn more about me and my campaign, you can go to johnhoadley.com and learn more about my issues and my values. Don't forget to vote on or before November 3rd. There's drop boxes with many of your clerks, and you can check your ballot status at mi.gov/vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to AAUW South Haven's virtual candidate forum. This next hour will be devoted to those candidates running for state representative for the 66th and 80th districts. I am Jean Bevavino, president of the South Haven affiliate of the American Association of University Women, AAUW. The forum builds upon AAUW's more than 130 years of responsible public participation. We are a nonpartisan, issue-oriented organization. We do not support or endorse candidates. In case you missed our first hour, I wanted to share a little bit about AAUW. AAUW advocates public discussion to ensure enlightened decisions. Locally, AAUW South Haven pursues its mission of advancing equity for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. We raise funds to help young women pursue their higher education goals. We attend school board meetings. We monitor legislation and health issues and communicate with our state and national legislators. We register new voters and conduct candidate forums. We provide financial and personal support for youngsters to achieve literacy. We participate in the Blessings in a Backpack program in our schools and provide dinners at Open Door and for teen parents. We are a busy bunch. I would like to take a moment to welcome back our moderator for this evening's forum, Dr. Melinda Gruber. Melinda has been an AAUW member for over 20 years. She is Vice President of Continued Care Services at Spectrum Health Lakeland System and President of Caring Circle, formerly Hospice at Home. She has extensive experience serving in leadership positions at local, state, and national levels. Most recently, Melinda was a Health and Aging Fellow through Columbia University, as well as a Federal Congressional Fellow through the American Political Science Association. Please welcome back Dr. Melinda Gruber.
Thank you, Jean, and welcome back to the AAUW Candidate Forum. For our second session tonight, we have candidates for the Michigan House of Representatives, and they are seated alphabetically by district. So for the 66th district, we have Beth Griffin and Abigail Wheeler. And for the 80th district, we have Eric Elmquist. And unfortunately, Mary Whiteford has been delayed on a return flight to Michigan and will not be able to make it, but wishes she was here. If she does fly in here all of a sudden, we'll let her join us. So now let me take a minute to go over the format for this evening. Each candidate will start with an opening statement, which will not exceed 3 minutes. Questions have been developed from those submitted by the public and by members of the AAUW Public Policy Committee. They reflect topics of predominant concern to our community and to our state. Answers to questions will be up to 2 minutes. Candidates are asked to stay focused on the question that was asked or may choose to pass. We will conclude the forum with each candidate having an opportunity for a final statement not to exceed 2 minutes. Our timekeeper, Julie Levitt, will keep track of time by raising cards when there are 30 seconds left, followed thereafter with a stop card. Each candidate has been asked to wear a mask when they're not speaking and has hand sanitizer to use each time they touch their masks. So let's get started. Each candidate will have up to 3 minutes for their opening statements. We'll go in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Eric Elmquist, and then we'll go to Beth Griffin, and then we'll go to Abigail Wheeler. So, Mr. Elmquist, you may start.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me here. Thank you to the AAUW for organizing this forum. I appreciate it very much, and I'm honored to be here. So let me tell you about myself. My name's Eric Almquist. I'm running for the Michigan House 80th here in Allegan County. I'm currently a city councilman in Fenville, and I work for Apple right now as a senior advisor. People ask me why you're running. Well, I find a lot of people are trying to figure out how to be Democrats, and people are trying to figure out how to be Republicans, but no one's really figuring out how to be decent. And I really think it's time for that. We need to focus on bringing results here back to Allegan and not focus on what it looks like to Washington. We need to make sure that we stand up for our families, our farms, and our schools, and we aren't doing that. We aren't taking care of those people. People don't want bipartisanship, or don't want partisanship. They want results. That's simple. We see it all the time. I think it's very important. It's beyond time that we expand Elliott Larson to protect those who could be fired or lose their home because of who they love. The time is now. I think we need to do this. I have extensive endorsements from auto workers, teachers, farmers, government workers, and Equality Michigan. So because there's that broad base, I think we need to make sure that everyone gets a chance to get lifted up. One of the things I like to talk about is something called ALICE. ALICE stands for asset limited, income constrained, but you're still employed. So it means you have a job, but you're probably not going to make any more money, and you don't have anywhere to go, and you're kind of stuck. You combine that number with the unemployed before COVID, we're talking 37% here in Allegan County. And it's been that way since 2015. It hasn't changed, and we need to fix that. That's a problem. 7% of the produce from Michigan comes from Allegan County, and we need to help our farmers, and they're failing. We're going to lose farmers crazy, and we have to take care of them. We have to make sure they have the tools they need to do the job, and we have to protect them because we're not doing a good job right now. We need to make sure the schools are properly funded. It's such an important thing. We're not doing it. We haven't been doing it, and it's such an important thing. Education is the future. We need to talk about bipartisanship and working together. And like COVID, I don't understand why COVID is so political now. Why is it wearing a mask is a hard thing to do? All we want people to do is socially distance, wash your hands, and wear a mask. And I think it's very important that I'd ask my voters to do that, and I know Mary would ask her voters to do that as well. So please, go ahead and make sure you wear your mask. That's such an important thing. Allegan County has stopped the next test because the cases are increasing. They just announced the next free testing. It's serious. We need to take it seriously. I plan to. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Griffin?
So, good evening. Thank you to the AAUW for inviting me here tonight and the opportunity to speak. This has been a really difficult year as coronavirus has affected the health and finances of families in Southwest Michigan in general, and even our entire country. As your state representative, I've been focused on helping our community and our neighbors through the difficulties that we faced. I voted to rush personal protective equipment to areas with the most need, and I personally helped deliver some of those supplies. I also worked to provide assistance for struggling families and businesses. My office alone helped over 600 families secure their unemployment benefits in times of great difficulty and delay. I also voted to preserve funding for our local schools and brave law enforcement, including providing hazard pay to first responders and police. Additionally, I worked to provide extra care and protection for our vulnerable seniors, especially the ones in nursing homes. They need a voice during these difficult times. While we remain safe and we remain committed to keeping our neighbors and our families safe, we also need to take smart actions to sensibly rebuild our economy and our lives. A healthy economy is so important because it provides jobs, hope, and the resources to fund our priorities and help those who are struggling. My plan to rebuild our economy includes supporting a quality education and skilled trades training, preventing frivolous lawsuits against small businesses, expanding broadband access across rural areas, and opposing tax increases that would hurt families and halt our economic recovery. Last year, I strongly stood against the massive gas tax increase, which would have hurt families, seniors, and drivers. And I helped stop the huge tax increase on small businesses that would have eliminated jobs and crippled our economy. We will recover because in Southwest Michigan, we do work hard. We care for our neighbors, and we work together to get the job done. As a former public school teacher, local government official, mom of 2 teens, both playing soccer right now, community food bank volunteer, and your state representative, I am grateful that I know my community well. I'm very confident that we will together build and confront this pandemic and recover together. Thank you for the privilege of representing you in the Michigan House, and I try to approach my job with a spirit of service and problem-solving attitude. Government requires a commitment to finding those solutions, to collaborate, and steady leadership is important, an understanding of the values and priorities of the community that I have a responsibility to represent in Lansing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Abigail Wheeler.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the AAUW for having me tonight. This is wonderful to be here, and I'm so excited. I'm Abigail Wheeler, running for state rep in Michigan's 66th State House District. For those of you who don't know, I am a firefighter EMT and have been in Southwest Michigan for a number of years now. And through my leadership and experiences as a firefighter and an EMT, I have been able to help our community. And it has been my honor to help our community. It's something that I'm very passionate about, especially during these times of COVID. Throughout the entire pandemic, I've been a frontline worker. I have been faced with nurses sitting on their front lawn crying because they know they have COVID, and they know that the fire department can't help them, and they just have to wait for the ambulance. They know how serious COVID is, so they tell us to stay away because they know that they just have to wait for the ambulance ride to the hospital. And it's heartbreaking, and there's something that we can do about it. As Eric said, wearing your mask, washing your hands, social distancing. I am also an elected official. I am a village council member in Mattawan, and I was elected in 2018 as the highest vote getter. I have worked tirelessly to try to improve transparency on the village council. One day, my family and I were outside raking our leaves, and we saw our leaf truck drive by. We thought to ourselves, we don't know when leaf pickup is. How do we know how our taxpayer dollars are being spent? How do we know what projects are going on? And that's when I decided to try to make a change. That's when I decided to run. And since then, we have made a Facebook page. We have increased our communication with an iris system and just made our constituents feel like they've been heard. And it's been my honor to help work on that. I am so excited to be running for state rep, to work on things like education so that our students and our teachers are getting quality, getting paid, getting the quality education that they deserve. I'm excited to be working for our water quality. PFAS has infiltrated the 66th district, and the people of the 66th district need our help. There are still people being affected by it today. I'm also excited to continue to work on transparency at the state level. I want to be able to FOIA our legislators and our governor. And I think it's important that our constituents and our citizens get that information. So again, thank you so much for having me tonight.
Excuse me. Okay. Thank you, candidates. So now I will ask you the questions for which you have 2 minutes for your answers. And we'll start with Beth Griffin, and then Abigail Wheeler, and then Eric Almquist. Sorry. So we'll start with access to health care. What goals do you have to achieve and advance fair and affordable access to health care for Michiganders? Beth Griffin.
A couple of steps here. Thanks. Affordable health care is an important issue. We all, through the COVID pandemic recently, have been asking a lot of really scary questions about our families, about what it means to our family if we lose our job. And we also have restricted access to health care because the hospitals are under a strict protocol. I've had a lot of phone calls from constituents and family that had to put off their cancer treatments because they were restricted from going into the hospital. And unfortunately, because I have a neighbor that is a doc in an ER, some of these people have died from that. So it has been a difficult year, but in my opinion, for the state to be able to continue our economic recovery and help pay for the programs such as healthcare that people need so badly, we simply must move forward, and we must be able to manage keeping our families safe and slowly reopening our economy so that the tax dollars can flow back to the state so that we can turn them around to take care of the people who are struggling. It's all related. And when you are an elected official, you have to weigh all those sides. So it has been difficult. And I do agree that we should be masking and taking social distancing precautions and washing our hands and using hand sanitizer. As a public school teacher, I agree with that too, that we should be doing the same thing for schools. But we must not lose sight of the fact that access to health care is in part reliant on us being able to recover our economy and have those tax dollars flowing back into the state so we can turn it around and help the people that we're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you. Abigail Wheeler.
I am a healthcare worker myself, and this is a near and dear topic to me. I have a father who is diabetic and actually switched occupations in order to have insurance that would help cover his insulin. And that's not fair. He loved what he did, and it's unfortunate that he had to give that up. I've also seen in my experience as a firefighter and an EMT, people who skip the ambulance ride. And these are people who need immediate care at an ER, who are scared that they're going to get a giant bill at the end of the day that they just cannot afford. So they instead call a taxi or call a friend instead of going with skilled paramedics to the hospital. So it is so, so important that we continue to work to expand healthcare access to everyone, to make it affordable. That's the reason that I have healthcare today is the Affordable Care Act. And it's the reason that my sister has it as well. She broke her ankle, and because of Medicaid work requirements, wasn't able to work, and because of those requirements, lost her health insurance. And when she needed her hardware and her ankle removed, she couldn't afford the surgery. I hear stories like that over and over again talking to constituents, and that's why we need to have serious solutions to healthcare. And expanding the access is more important now than ever, especially with the COVID crisis going on. There are people each and every day who are having long-term effects from COVID, that are having heart issues, pro athletes who cannot play anymore. And that's why we need to take this seriously.
Thank you. Eric Almquist.
Thank you. But one of the big problems we have right now is that healthcare is attached to your job, and if you lose your job, we're seeing it happen right now. People are losing their jobs and lose access to healthcare. But it's not just that; it's access to healthcare where there is no place to go as finances shrink, and people don't have transportation. A big issue in my county is transportation. People can't get to jobs, so we have to look at granular solutions for these. I remember as a kid what they would do. The doctor would come out to the school. The dentist would come out to the school. We need to be mobile and bring these things to the people where they are because they can't get where they need to go. They're not going to choose to. We need to go where they are and take care of them. All the solutions involve getting out to the people and granular solutions like that. That's what I would do. I'd go ahead and make it mobile, get it out to them so they can get taken care of, so they can be seen. Something that's not going to cost, doesn't matter what kind of insurance you have. We need to work on taking care of these people because they're not getting the help they need and they're dying. And this pandemic has shown how bad it is. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our next question, we will start with Abigail Wheeler, and then we will go to Eric Elmquist, and then Beth Griffin. Disparities in healthcare outcomes across racial groups have been well documented. What is your opinion on efforts to decrease implicit bias and improve access to healthcare for Michiganders? Abigail.
John Hoadley said it right. Black babies are dying at twice the rate that white babies are. And that right there proves the racial disparity. These are young, innocent lives that have done nothing and are being taken carelessly because we aren't taking our healthcare crisis seriously. And for me, that's serious. In order to improve this, like we said, we need to expand and continue to provide the services that people need. Each and every day, there are people who are suffering, and I think now more than ever, it is with COVID, it is so important that we help these people. The racial disparity is heartbreaking, and the bias training is needed. We see it in our police force, and we see it even in our daily lives, the racial disparities that go on. And so informing people of these, informing people of the privileges that others have and the disparity and the disadvantages that others have is more important than ever. I mean, education on these topics is really how we're going to get to the root of it.
Thank you. Eric Elmquist.
Implicit bias. I remember I worked for Apple when we did our implicit bias training. It's such an important thing we don't realize it's there. Maternal deaths, how we rank as a country, we are dead last in industrial countries. We are not doing a very good job of taking care of mothers and their children. And African American is where they're suffering because doctors think they have thicker skins and they can hold up to more pain. We need to teach people about this so they're taking care of people who know who they are. It's such an important thing. I know my opponent had a different view on implicit bias training, but I took it, and I don't think Tim Cook thinks I'm racist, so I think it's a really great thing we need to do. I've been through it, and it still needs to be done every year because we don't realize what we don't realize. And that's what implicit bias is, work in training. You don't realize that you're showing a bias to this. Why would you think you are? I've never been racist in my life. But it doesn't matter how it appears to you. It matters how it appears to the person. And we are doing a poor job at this. We are doing a poor job of taking care of people in this country, especially mothers and children. And we need to fix that now. How do you do that? You get some coalitions going. You work together with people. That's my strength, building coalitions. And that's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Griffin.
Thank you for the question. So I'll start my response a little bit differently. When we were discussing a particular bill that had to do with law enforcement over the late summer, which I did vote for, I voted to increase police training for law enforcement that dealt in part with increased implicit bias training and a couple other things. First I talked to my stepsister She's Black. She has 4 children. She's married to my brother-in-law, who is half Black, half white. And our kids grew up together, and I had a heart-to-heart with her, and I said, she's from out of state. And I just said, help me understand the other side here, because what am I missing? And we had a good heart-to-heart talk, and it really inspired me. It inspired me to sit down and talk to some of my colleagues in the House. They are African-American representatives, and, a lot of good things came out of it. I think we listened differently, and, learning every day, and I think that that's really the part of the job of a state representative, is to listen to all sides and to be able to collaborate. And I think that overall, it helped me be really comfortable with voting for the increased training for law enforcement. Our sheriff, Dan Abbott, was completely supportive of the bill as well, and talked to me for a little while about what they're already doing. So some police training right now does deal with certain types of bias, but I do think it's really, there is merit to looking at training programs from time to time to improve them. As a teacher, it's done all the time in teacher prep courses, and so with law enforcement, the same. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our next question, we will start with Eric Elmquist, and then we'll go to Beth Griffin, and then we'll finish with Abigail Wheeler. And the question is, what is your plan to promote life-saving, life-enhancing relations between police and the communities they serve?
Thank you for that question. It's very, actually, near and dear to my heart. One of the things that in Fenville right now, we're actually trying to increase the police force because it's something that needs to be done. But as just saw in a report, there is a mismatch between the racial breakdown of the officers and the communities they serve. We need to work on that, first of all, to make sure they match the communities. And that's why I thought it's very important that we have another officer come into our town and try to fund it so we can match that. Because I want our community to be able to feel safe when they're there. Whether we specifically need another officer, there are other solutions, but this is important to the community. It's about making them feel safe. If you can make your citizens feel safe, that's key. The other thing I like to focus on is talk about the elephant in the room about defunding police. I'm not about defunding police, but I would like to make sure that the great officers out there, and I have lots of friends who are, that they're protecting, they're giving cover. And we do this with liability insurance to the officers. The good officers pay a very little amount. The bad officers will get themselves out of the system. And what that does is that gives a cover for the good officer, so he doesn't have to cover the bad officer. He can see right there what his number is. And if you're doing a good job, you're going to stay. If you're not doing a good job, you will go away and you won't be a police officer in the area. And that's how we build trust in the communities. We work on it. We work together. I want the second officer in our town so that officer can go to the school and visit the school and visit the kids and play basketball with them so they have time to do that. That's how we fix that issue. So we're working together and we can have some of the best police force in Michigan.
Thank you. Beth Griffin?
Thank you for the question. So, ways to support life-enhancing relationships with law enforcement. First of all, as a public school teacher, I really think a great example of relationship building with law enforcement is to look at what we're currently doing with resource officers in schools. They attend school on a daily basis. Some schools have a part-time resource officer that may work for the township or the county but comes into the school half a day. Some have full-time. And these resource officers hang out. They talk to kids. They're around after school. They go to extracurricular activities. And their job is just to really get to know the kids well and for the kids to relax around them, to understand that everybody gets along. When conflict happens, it's easier to work through it if you know the person. So I think communication is key. Resource officers are a great way that schools take advantage of that to help support kids that are going through tough days and some kids that are going through sometimes unimaginable crises when they come to school. And, it's a challenge as a teacher to know that some of the kids you have are fighting some pretty important battles of their own, but that resource officer is always there to protect everyone, including the child that's going through having a really rough day. And just in general, I would say that part of supporting a healthy, life-enhancing relationship with law enforcement is also as a parent, to teach a respect for authority and to understand that law enforcement is there to protect them and to protect themselves, to protect community and to protect every single person in the community. For example, our own Sheriff Abbott, I think, did a really good job this summer when the BLM protest came to South Haven, and he met with both sides, sat down with them, and just said, well, I'll continue later. I just ran out of time.
Thank
I'll
you.
finish that
Thank you
thought
for
later.
respecting the time. I appreciate it.
Yep, it's fine.
Abigail Wheeler.
Thank you. I work with police officers quite a bit in my job each and every day. And after the peaceful protesters went home in Kalamazoo and the riots broke out, unfortunately, I worked right alongside public safety officers who took off their gun belt, took off their bulletproof vest, and put on their fire gear. And we put out house fires together all night long. It was about a 36-hour battle. And I think that it's really important that we restructure the police system to keep everyone safe, to keep police officers safe, and to keep citizens safe. Bias training is, again, one of the best ways to do that. I think it's also really important to get police officers from the community. Recruit community members to be these police officers. They're the best ones to know their community, the ins and outs of it, the people of it, and making those connections and having that communication is vital. Without the wonderful police officers we have in our system, frankly, my job would be a lot harder. They help keep me safe on certain scenes, and they work alongside me when they're public safety officers as firefighters as well. So I think it's really important that we keep that relationship going and that we build on it. We give them the resources that they need to do their job properly and to do it safely. Again, I think every single police agency should have body cameras. It's so important to hold police officers who choose to do wrong things accountable. And I look forward to working on that.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question, we'll start with Beth Griffin, and then we'll go to Abigail Wheeler, and then we'll finish with Eric Quist. So there's a lot of discussion about how the climate is changing. As your district is along Lake Michigan, what is your perspective about global climate change and the impact on the Great Lakes, and what would you do about it? Beth Griffin.
Thank you for the question. If you don't mind, I'm going to finish my thought from the previous question, and then I'll handle that one. I was saying in response to the relationship between law enforcement and the community that our own Sheriff Abbott handled the BLM protest this summer in South Haven very well. He met with both groups. Both groups were given space to do their thing, to do their protest. No violence, no damage to any property. Both sides were kept safe, and everybody went home. Law enforcement protected both sides' right to free speech. And no one was hurt. And why did this happen? Because the sheriff sat down with both sides, gave respect, and said, "You guys, my job is to keep both sides safe, and for everybody to be able to exercise free speech." And it was an example of a good relationship between law enforcement and the community. So, real quickly about the other question. So, I'm proud to be supported by the Farm Bureau. One of the things that we're always talking about with the Farm Bureau and the farmers in a community is the number of growing days and how climate affects their crops. So it is something that farmers are very concerned with. And most importantly, when farmers are talking about climate change, what they're worried about in Southwest Michigan specifically is the fact that we are in a microclimate. A microclimate is what happens, is why the grapes grow so well here. It's why everything grows so well here. And so farmers are the best stewards of the land. They understand that you really need to be good stewards of the land in order to take advantage of the microclimate and to grow the crops that we have. So, thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Abigail Wheeler.
This district is unique when it comes to climate change, and we are definitely seeing the effects of it. Right here in South Haven, we are seeing houses falling off a cliff. We are seeing the waters rising, and around the district, seeing waters rising as well. Flooding is a real issue. And we need to have action now. We're getting to the point where it is irreversible, the damage that we're doing to the earth. And I think that Van Buren County especially can lead the way for renewable energy. We have a lot of open farmland, lots of great spaces for solar panels, wind turbines. The nuclear plant is shutting down, and we have to replace that energy somehow. And renewable energy is the way to do that. It is a great way to safely continue to provide energy to the people who need it. And it's a great way that we can really do that for northern Michiganders as well, who are reliant on Line 5. A great way that we can continue to give them energy in a safe way. I'm also proud to be endorsed by the Sierra Club and be a climate-friendly candidate. It's something that I take very seriously because we need to preserve this earth for generations to come. And taking serious action now is what we need to do in order to do that. Thank you.
Okay, Eric Elmquist.
Great question. Climate change. Well, one thing that COVID has taught us when we were locked down, we're getting close to the edge, but it is fixable. I don't know if you ever saw the pictures of Los Angeles, how the smog went away when the traffic went away. It is doable. Looking at in Italy, in the canals, and there were fish swimming. It is possible and it's doable, but we have to find it important. We don't find it important. We spend a lot of years saying that, no, this wasn't what it is, and fighting about that. We need to take it seriously. Realize it's here. Talked about the farmers being good stewards of the area. Great, let's ask them to do that, but we're not providing them support. We need to give them the support to do this. They want to do this. I love the idea of having them farm stuff such as energy. Solar powered, have them farm that because they can. But there's some granular solutions that need to happen if they're going to do that. We need to allow people and farmers to be able to sell back. It's capped on what they can sell back energy-wise. We need to remove that so they can go ahead and grow that. There's plenty of farmland to do that, and if they have a financial interest in that, that's a win. That's also another solution for something else, because if we're going to have to transmit that energy out of there, why not use those lines to bring in the internet to the communities that need it? It's a great solution. We can run across those lines, and it is possible to do. These things are possible, but we have to take it seriously. It can't be an afterthought. It can't be that we can't do it because we can. But again, it's going to need a coalition. You know, there's a lot of people who, in my family, who disagree. You know, they may think they like someone else. But you know what? In the end of the day, we have a lot of really, really hard stuff coming. And it's important on the coalitions we build at the end of the day and what we can do. And that's my strength. And I have hope. And I think we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. The next question, we'll start with Abigail Wheeler. We'll go to Eric Elmquist, and then Beth Griffin will finish us off. So there's great disparity in access to broadband internet in the rural areas you would represent. Students as well as their families are challenged as they try to work from home during the pandemic. What is your plan to ensure that all of your constituents have access to the internet?
Thank you. In my district in particular, particularly Van Buren County, this is true. There are many, many people who do not have access to broadband internet or even have choices of internet. I know personally I have two choices, and they're both not great. And so we need to, especially during this pandemic, working from home, students trying to learn, college students doing remote learning, we need to attack this. We need to, this also hurts small business, as we know. Small business owners rely on it, whether it's their, their payment systems or just running day-to-day life. And I think that Eric had a great idea of when we're doing this, let's lay down some internet access. Let's lay down some fiber optic. It's really, really expensive for a business, a small business especially, to try to get access to fiber optic. I personally worked with a small business who was trying to get fiber optic to go across the street, and it was $5,000. So we need to be able to hold these internet companies accountable. And as government, we need to be able to step in and say that this is now becoming a human right to better your education, to earn a living, instead of just having internet access. It is truly, truly becoming a right because it is the way of life in 2020.
Thank you. Eric Almquist.
COVID is again showing how we're not prepared. We have some issues. When Comcast went ahead and purchased NBC, one of the goals they had to do is they had to provide internet access to people who didn't have it. Now, in the areas that have service, they're kind of doing that, but they're making it hard. We have not held them accountable for that, not once but twice. We haven't done that we need to hold them accountable for that. It's also very important to make sure we allow some competition. In my town, Comcast has a franchise agreement. It's $3,000, and that agreement says there can be no other internet companies in that area. So there's no other choice. No, people are not going to get served. We need to make sure this gets taken care of. It may need some government money to get this done. In the 1930s, we went ahead and powered the South. This should be easy. This should be a piece of cake to do. Whether it's WiMAX, whether it's getting satellite service that allows people to get this service, it is possible to do. Again, getting the right people, coalitions of the right people to do this, we put a man on the moon. This should be easy, but we're making it really hard. Let's make this easy. Let's just get it done. Let's agree to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Griffin.
Thank you for the question, and thanks, guys, because this is a great conversation, and it's one that I've been very involved in the now my fourth year that I've been serving. Let me just say to start out that government at all levels is working on improved internet access for us. And in the last year, what I have been experiencing, because I'm actually sponsoring and running a bill along with Senator Nesbitt that would allow us to lay fiber optic in rural unserved areas. And that bill is in the process of moving to the House right now. But it was slowed because the FCC is working on redefining what unserved is or what underserved is. Unserved means there's no internet access whatsoever, not even one provider, even if the provider isn't all that great. Underserved means there might, in a 2-mile square census block, there might be 2 houses that are being served, but there might be 25 houses that are not served at all. And so the instrument through which the government measures whether you're served and unserved is a very blunt instrument. And so all of the major providers pooled their data together into the FCC to create a more accurate picture of where those unserved areas are and to better define exactly where we need the help. So to all that to say, now I voted on a bill last week that helps take federal money and put it towards rural or unserved areas in Michigan. And in July, $10.7 million was a grant combination that I helped Bloomingdale Communications get, which serves an additional 7,700 residents, 19 businesses, and 22 farms in Van Buren County. So it's an ongoing conversation. It's a good one. And it is true, Van Buren County is mostly underserved unless you're in the fiber ring with the schools. So thank you.
Thank you. So our next round of questions will start with Eric Almquist, and then we'll go to Beth Griffin, and then we'll finish with Abigail Wheeler. And this question has to do with education in public schools. What measures would you propose to ensure that all students have access to universal, free public education of the highest quality?
Well, we have a system that is very unequal right now with education. We have school choice, which is fantastic, but we have charter schools, and charter schools are fantastic too. There's some very good ones in this area. They're not required to take the students. If they don't have the space, they don't take them. Then there's a real problem we have where a charter school is run by an authorizer, and the authorizer just determines whether that school keeps going or not. It's not the governor. It's very hard for a governor to shut down a failing charter school. But the authorizer, who makes money, 3%, one way or the other, the school's doing well, not doing well, they're still making 3%. There is no incentive for them to shut it down. We had a plan in place, bipartisan plan, can you believe it, between the Democratic mayor of Detroit and our Republican governor to solve this issue. But a lot of money was fed in, more money than ever has been done, to go ahead and have that bill fail. And so when we talk about money, it's one of the things we need to focus on what needs to be done and not just focus on the interest of a few, but focus on the interest of everyone. Because everyone can do well, everyone can rise if we do this. But the current system is designed to take money from and put money to. And we need to make sure that that gets balanced back. And it's a key thing. My father was an educator, he was a teacher. And he thought it was so important to go out and serve. He actually went down to Selma and marched because it was that important to do, risked his job. So we need to make sure that people are given the chance to get good education, and it's making a fair and balanced system, which it's not. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Griffin?
Thank you. I look forward to sharing my thoughts on education. As most of you know, I was a middle school education teacher when I taught, and it is a tough job. It's an extremely tough job, especially when middle schools in the spring don't like to listen. They get very wiggly, but luckily I was up to the task. Education is always a challenge. Right now, we know that Proposal A is a funding formula that gives more money to schools with less of a tax base than schools that have more of a tax base. That was created with one goal, to help level the playing field between the schools that didn't have as much money as the other schools. And the gap has lessened over time. There is still a gap, though. So do we still have more work to do? Absolutely. To overhaul the Proposal A funding mechanism, though, for schools, which determines how much money per pupil a school gets, is extremely complex, and it's very political. As first termer on Education Committee, I learned a lot about, I knew a lot about teaching, but there's still a lot. The education process is extremely complex and layered. One way that the legislature has attempted to even the playing field for specifically for students with maybe more challenges or more barriers to success is that on top of the Proposal A funding mechanism, we have developed line item additional amounts of money. So if there's in school A, if there are X amount of kids that are at risk, then we would attach an additional $25, an additional $50 towards each child that's at risk. And in that way, we help to level the playing field a little bit more for kids that are just in need of more help. And that does sometimes mean more money because they may need more assistance or like a special teacher aide or something like that. So we're working on it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Abigail Wheeler.
We need to get rid of DeVos money, get rid of that special interest in our public schools. Who wants to take private school money and put it towards take public school money and put it towards private schools? Our public school funding needs to go to public schools. A big thing that we need to address is teacher pay. They are shaping our future, and they are not getting paid to play the many roles that they do. Teachers can be social workers, they can be parents, they can be friends, they can be a lot of things to a student, but they need the resources to properly help those students in schools. And that's why it's so important to have these social workers in schools. It's so important to have parapros, paraprofessionals that can help students with disabilities. I talked to a constituent recently who felt like students with disabilities were falling behind more than regular students because of this issue, because of not having access to independent education plans and their school not having resources to provide these independent education plans. So the funding is still not there, especially for students with disabilities who need it. And that's why it's so important that we support our teachers and that they have the appropriate staffing, whether it's a social worker, a paraprofessional, to help them in their day-to-day activities with their students. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, we have time for one last question, and it's my favorite. So the order for answering those will be Beth Griffin, and then Abigail Wheeler, and then Eric Almquist. And the question is, please indicate any areas of another party's platform with which you agree and you are willing to work in a bipartisan effort towards successful legislation.
Absolutely. Actually, that's a good question. Let me first respond, Abigail, to your concern about the constituent with special ed issues. I taught special ed for a year, and I think that constituent needs to call me, because if it's true that the person doesn't have access to an IEP, then that school is in violation of federal law. And if they are, please have them call me. It's an area that I know a little bit about, and if a student is on a 504, that just means they get maybe a little extra help, but it's not as there's not as much paperwork with it. But if they have an actual IEP and they have a disability, then the school does have obligations, and there's usually a paper trail too. And so if that's true, please, we'll talk about that afterwards. And also, something you said.
Really want to hear you answer my favorite question.
About how to collaborate on an issue?
Yeah.
I'm
But
getting
on
to
another
it right
party's on another party's platform.
now. Yeah. Your idea about increasing the training for law enforcement, with you on that. And I actually voted on a bill that does that, and I would love to talk to you more a little bit about that. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Abigail Wheeler.
I think that we agree on a lot of things, and we want the best for our communities, whether it's clean water or education. It's really important that we shape our future. And I would love to talk about that constituent who truly did have a problem. She was an advocate for students and with parents. And so I would love to share that story. The broadband access, I mean, you've been in Van Buren County, you know how these people don't have access, and it is crippling, whether it's their small business, their education, or keeping their job. So working that would be fantastic. And then again, the policing aspect of giving police officers resources that they need to be able to do their job safely, to keep our citizens safe, and to make sure that everyone is taken care of at the end of the day.
Thank you. Eric Almquist.
I love this question, too. It's a really great question because it gets you to think about how you work together. My opponent, Mary, has had two great plans of count. One, she's talking about human trafficking. Great to work on. Why would that not stop? We are missing some pieces to that. The big cause, what causes that, is homelessness. And that bill, unfortunately, doesn't address that. It's a great bill, but it needs some teeth to it. It needs some stuff to help the root cause, the granular solution. I've talked about this before. The other thing her telemedicine bill is really great. How do you get it to them if they don't have internet access? These things need to be addressed on it. We need to work. You can't just come up with a big solution and expect it to be solved. You have to work through the granular parts of that, and that's my expertise, and that's why we work on them. My biggest concern, if the House flips, that we go the other direction and it's, oh my God, the Democrats have done all this time. But there's something about a House that is split evenly where you have to get forced to work together. And where you say, hey, I really like your bill. Let's go get 4 Republicans on this and work on this together. Because we're going to come up with some really great solutions, because we're going to have a coalition of people working on this. This is what it's about, working together. That's why it's such a great question, because we have this huge opportunity to be one of the best legislations in the United States. and we can set the example. We're struggling with that, but we have a golden opportunity right now to set the example for everyone else, and I want to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We are now at the point where we'll give each of you up to 2 minutes for a wrap-up statement. And the order will be Abigail Wheeler, Eric Elmquist, and we'll finish with Beth Griffin. So go ahead with your time.
Well, I just want to say thank you again to the AAUW for holding this. This has been fantastic. I'm so glad we could do it in a safe manner, and I'll be here, of course, with the exception of Mary, who's here in spirit. I just wanted to remind everyone to make sure that you vote. It's so, so important this year, especially. You can vote before or on November 3rd. If you need more information on that, mi.gov/vote is a great place to start. I am so excited to be running for this office. I am proud to be a public servant, and I want to continue to truly serve the public. I've lived in the 66th district my entire life, Van Buren County my entire life. And I'm a third-generation graduate from Mattawan schools, and I'm very, very proud of that. And so I have deep roots here. So the people around me matter. They're my neighbors, they're my friends, a lot of them are my family. And I want to do my best to serve them, to actually listen to them, to be able to go have coffee when it's safe enough to, and really, really make these connections, because there are people who are in need. And I want to truly be a representative that that goes to people. I don't want to be a name on a ballot. I want to be the person that they know, the person that they can call, the person's office that they can go to. And I'm just so grateful for all the support we've had throughout the run. And again, make sure you vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Elmquist.
Well, again, thank you guys for having this forum. It was fantastic, and I'm very glad that you guys did this. Wish we'd have more of these. One thing I think we need to focus on is there's a lot of hate going on and not enough listening. And I want to be that person that listens. Usually we come up and we say, I have these great solutions. These solutions I've talked about are not from me. These are from listening to people, smart people, much smarter than I am, getting these solutions. And they walk through and like, oh my God, that's a really great idea. Let's explore this and see what we can find out about this. We need to make sure that we tone down the rhetoric on all sides. We're not doing that. I got to tell you something exciting. This just happened the other day, and how about what gets me excited. I remember when I sat in something with Mary, and we had this event, and she talked about how she had saved $1 million for the citizens of Michigan. She had cut some of the budget in the DEQ, and just very proud of doing that. That's a lot of money. Well, in my town, which is 1 by 1 mile, had something similar happen. Voters in Michigan decided they want to allow recreational marijuana. So we passed it, allowed it. My motion passed 4-3. I was very excited about that. It was a fight for that. Problem is, most municipalities didn't pass it, so we did. Well, what did that do before any recreational marijuana has been sold? Well, it allowed us to take the old Village Hall, put it on the market for about $200,000, and it sold for $300,000 because our housing values and business values are going up. We now have 5 new businesses who are now starting or have started during this time frame. And so what happened is we took that money, put it towards that $300,000, put it towards a project to fix our biggest water line. What it means is we're going to go ahead, give the citizens of Fenville a new main water line 6 years in advance, and we save them $1 million in my 1 by 1 town. That gets me excited. That makes me wake up. I'm the one guy who says, hey, the public works stuff gets me excited. That kind of stuff gets me excited because it's a generational thing that fixes things for people. Thank you.
Thank you. And Beth Griffin can close us for the evening.
Thanks so much. And Eric, the bipartisan work that you were talking about, the cool thing is that we do that already, and we are all stronger for it. But I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you for having me on today. And in closing, I just want to reiterate that, as a community and a family with steady leadership, we will all get through this together. I encourage all of you that, that are listening tonight or that are here in the audience to please extend to each other the grace that we all need to be kind to each other. even when we disagree or when we're under extreme stress. I will continue to provide that steady leadership, and my door is always open to you. I can help fix many things. I can pray for you too, but I cannot do everything. So neighbors, keep checking on your neighbors. Churches, stay vigilant in your ministries. Friends, don't forget that we are going into the holiday season with over 200 local Van Buren County families in extreme duress, still waiting on UIA benefits to come through for them. Moving forward, I will continue my efforts to craft a post-executive order local COVID-19 response policy involving our own health department, which will rely on local health data, not statewide generic data. And in the legislature, I will be very vocal about my support for the nursing home policy reversal bill and look forward to the governor's signature on the reopening of UIA and Secretary of State branch offices. Thank you for the privilege of representing you in the Michigan House, and I'm asking for your vote on November 3rd. I look forward to continuing my job with a tireless spirit of service and a problem-solving attitude. I look forward to helping people, one day at a time, working towards real solutions and protecting our health, safety, and livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your participation. And again, thank you to the City of South Haven for the use of the facilities and the tech expertise behind the doors back there, and to Cozy Radio for the simultaneously broadcasting this virtual candidates forum. And finally, I'd like to thank the audience for their interest, and remember, everyone to vote. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.